So my father's an immigrant, came here when he was 4 years old. His father was a carpenter. My grandmother was a seamstress. He got to senior year in high school, and his brain bully, his guidance counselor, said, "You're not smart enough to go to college. Just become a carpenter like your father." He went on to go to Cornell and MIT for a master's and doctorate, and got another master's at Cornell, became a very successful executive, and was Assistant Secretary of Energy under the Obama administration.
Wow.
So when you choose to not listen to your brain bully, but have the confidence and contentment in knowing that it doesn't matter, you don't have to compare yourself to other people. You don't have to be smarter than anyone else. He wasn't smarter than anyone else, and that's why he got into this. He just didn't care. He didn't care what anyone else was doing. He didn't care if there were other people smarter than him. He knew his skill set and his limitations.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Punch Me in the Face. We really appreciate jumping on. We have an amazing guest today. I have Lynn Smith with me. And Lynn, you become very highly recommended from all the people I talked to. And I was telling you before we got started, and I'm going to be honest, Lynn, I'm in a place where I had made this commitment that I was going to stop reading all these books and only read the Bible every day. Because I'd read so many books. And then I'm like, I don't even know if I agree with this. This guy's actually never done this. And so my assistant said, hey, you should look at her book. And I started reading it, and I was crazy intrigued. I'm really, really honored to have you on with us. I really am. And to kind of give you an idea, Lynn, of who you're probably talking to today. Most of our folks are, from people I talk to and the feedback we get, most of them are working a job, have been working jobs. They're trying to find a way for some ancillary income. They're trying to make some decisions. A lot of them are bridging the gap between I'm a full-time employee, but man, in today's world, I'm not where I want to be. I'd like to be an independent contractor, entrepreneur, maybe full-time, part-time. And they actually say to me all the time, I said, what's the number one thing holding you back? And the nice answer is always me. And I go, okay, well, explain that. And they say, it's funny, having the confidence to go do it. So we actually have like the confidence expert on today. So if you can't get it after talking to Lynn, but Lynn, if you wouldn't mind just kind of setting the stage and telling us a little bit about you and where you're at. And again, thank you so much for making time for us. I'm really honored and humbled that you jumped on.
Hey, I appreciate it, Shawn. I love what you do. I love the mission of what this podcast is about, because it's getting people over that hump of why are you holding yourself back, right? So I talk with people about perceived weaknesses. That's what we think hold us back. We think that these things we're not so good at is holding us back. And then our fears, that's what actually holds us back. And I spent time this last 2 years. I was a news anchor for 15 years. I was at NBC, MSNBC, CNN, blah, blah, blah. I know what makes a good story. But when I got out there and I started coaching high-level individuals of powerful companies to be good on TV, I found from that individual to a startup CEO, they all had the same fear. It was the fear of failure or imposter syndrome. It's someone's not going to think I'm good at this. Someone's going to know that I'm really not worthy of this. I'm just going to fail in general. And what I have been trying to instill in everyone in the confidence quotient is that confidence is contentment. It is satisfaction in your dreams, in your aspirations, and in the future. That you know that if you keep pushing forward and you keep hitting a wall of failure, and that just means you're one step closer to success, that you will reach it. That's confidence. It's not, hey, I think I'm great. No, that's arrogance. It's, I know if I keep pushing through, no matter how many rejections I get, no matter how many perceived failures, when in fact a failure is just getting you one step closer to success, that if you keep going, you will be successful. And that's what I hope to instill in everybody that's listening right now, is if you believe that you can do it and you set your mind to that intention, that you will accomplish it. It works 100% of the time.
Well, perceived weaknesses, can you explain that to me?
Yes.
Specifically, what does that mean to the person?
So I explained what fears are. Those are the things that actually hold us back. Mm-hmm. Perceived weaknesses are the things that we think hold us back, like my own. So my perceived weakness is public speaking. I have always gotten up on stage, and everybody expects me to be good at it. But I get up on stage and the camera's my crutch. So I could sit here all day long and have a conversation with you and look into the camera and go through the lens and not talk at the lens.
Yeah.
But I used to have a sea of people staring at me. And all of a sudden, my voice starts to shake. My knees start to shake. And in Confidence Quotient, you read about how I had a panic attack in the middle of one of my speaking engagements. And it was one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me. But had that not happened to me, I would not be able to then say out loud, this is what I think I'm not good at. And when I said it out loud, I then got the help I needed. I got a keynote coach. I followed my 3 pillars of confidence: preparation, purpose, and promise, which you can read about in the Confidence Quotient. But that first preparation piece was I went out there, I knew my work. I was teaching my work. And I went out there and I did it. So I overcame what I thought was holding me back. And so if you say out loud what your perceived weakness is, you and then are able to turn it into your superpower, which now I go out and I do keynotes. That doesn't mean that I'm not every single time I walk up on stage thinking, why do they want to hear from me? Or I'm going to have another panic attack. I actually opened my last keynote with, I have a confession to make. Right before I walked up here, I thought to myself, why do these people want to hear from me?
Wow.
And immediately you create connection in that way.
Well, that's, I was gonna say, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people struggle, right? At the end of the day, you know, everybody in that audience is sitting there, and what are they looking for? I mean, they're looking for, you know, I don't tend to, I like to talk about everything, and it doesn't freak me out. Some people it freaks them out, right? Like politics don't freak me out. Number one, I never thought they were going to save my life. I don't hate any of the networks. I don't love any of the networks. They're just there, you know? But I did say this because this made sense to me. I said, I'm going to tell you what, and not that I like made any money doing this. I don't bet on presidential elections. I probably should have, and I would have made money. But I said, well, before it happened, I said, no way Trump beats Biden. Biden can, I don't care what he does. My buddy's like, why? I said, dude, eventually you have to humble yourself. Like eventually it has to be we, not I. Like, and again, I know how I'm going to vote because like it's how I voted my whole life, right? Like I know what side I fall on. Like if you taught me, you're like, oh, you voted Republican. Yeah. Like it's like, you know where I'm at. But at the end of the day, I said, I don't care how good your business practices are. I don't care how much success you've had. Nobody likes an egomaniac. Nobody. You might laugh with them for a little bit, and you're really laughing at them, not with them. But when you walk up on stage and you say, I don't know why you want to hear from me, it like crumbles people. They're like, oh man, like she's pretty cool. And like, she's really awesome. She's done a lot of really cool stuff. But she's thinking, wait a minute, I think those things too. I have my own self-doubt, which obviously you're very smart. So I'm not telling you, I already know, you know what you're doing. But like for people that are listening, like, because I think that what happens when you get around very successful people, like I was a social worker 14 years. And people said, what were the hardest cases to work? I worked child protective services for 14 years, abused and neglected children. And I said, they said, man, it must have been really hard going into some of those areas. I'm like, well, I didn't grow up in a good area. So like, that didn't freak me out. I said, but I would get around a lot of people that were leaders and they were damaged just like other people, but people were intimidated to talk to them because you thought they weren't, because they were the superintendent of the school or they were the CEO of the company. And I used to like start with them and say, guys, listen, I know you have an attorney here and most of my clients can't afford an attorney. I got that. But I need you to understand that everybody's effed up.
Yeah.
So like before you start getting ahead of yourselves, whatever you all talk about, and I have to navigate it differently because you have counsel. Let's be clear. I know how this works. They sent me by myself. So I'm good. Before you get excited, I'm good. I'm real smart too. They sent me by myself with no attorney. And our attorney wouldn't be any near as good as you. He's free. And you're $400, $500, $700 an hour. But you realize, like, when you talk about the imposter syndrome, right? There's a lot of very successful people that on a daily basis are like terrified.
Every single one I've ever coached, every single one, they don't have a safe space to admit it. So let's do an exercise, Shawn. This is what we do with every single person. So I want you to think of, and we're going to name this, it's your saboteur. It's the voice that actually tells us that. So a saboteur or a brain bully. So I recently had a client come on, extremely successful doctor who also writes for WebMD and also writes for a major Ivy League publication. You can't get better than that, right? I asked her, what are you afraid of? And she said, I'm afraid that my colleagues will think less of me and that I'm trying to become some, Dr. Oz or something. That's what she's afraid of. She's afraid of what people will think of her. So I said, well, let's name that saboteur. That's a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Name that brain bully is what she called them, which I thought was brilliant. A brain bully, that voice. So if you could right now, who would you say your saboteur? And it doesn't have, you don't have to overthink it. It could be, mine was Karen. I've renamed it. But, a Karen's always somebody that's putting you down or, is pushing back. What would you name your saboteur or your brain bully?
Lucifer.
There you go. Perfect. So now when that Lucifer comes up and starts saying, God, you sounded really stupid when you said that, or
Mm-hmm.
you're going to fail at this, or why do they want to hear from you? Say to Lucifer, sit down. Don't push it away. Sit down. Watch this. Come on
Mm-hmm.
in. Let me show you. And then the other thing I said when she named her saboteur and her brain bully, it was somebody who always gave her a hard time coming up in medical school. She was always like, oh, isn't that cute that you write for something? And I said, you have young kids. What do you tell your kids when they've got a bully at school? How do you explain to them what a bully is? And she said, well, I explained to them, bullies usually feel really badly about themselves. They have to be mean to other people. So if we look at our saboteur or our brain bully with compassion, rather than looking at them as somebody who's trying to defeat us and it's a battle back and forth, but instead saying, oh, I'm so sorry. You must be going through something really hard. We can push through the power of what that brain bully does to us and how loud that voice and how effective that voice is in whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's a keynote or it's taking that huge jump that you want to take from a W-2 to an entrepreneur, because that voice is telling you, what if I can't pay my bills? What am I going to do without health insurance? What if nobody buys my product? All those thoughts gives the brain bully all the power. But if you say, oh, that's so unfortunate, you don't believe in me yet. Okay, sit down, watch this. And you go and you do what you know, and you make the plan as a smart entrepreneur. I'm not saying that everyone can just go do whatever they want, but when you're a smart entrepreneur and you make good decisions and you go towards them with resiliency, then you will be successful.
So, well, first of all, outstanding. And I appreciate that, because I can think of, for me, it was always, I thought because where people came from or what they did or who they were, that they were better than me, right? Like, I'm like, okay, well, you lived in a nice house and you all had cars and you had nice stuff and you went to good colleges. And so when I got in this business, matter of fact, I'll never forget, long time ago, I don't even know why I did this, but I decided I wanted to try to be on The Apprentice Trump show. Forever. It was like his third season. And I'm waiting outside of the Trump hotel in New York City. And I'm outside forever in the rain for like 5 hours. And they bring us in. There's thousands, this news, thousands of people, right? And you're waiting out there forever. And they bring you downstairs where you've been in the Trump Tower, they have the cafeteria downstairs, and we're downstairs. They clear that whole thing out and they're doing group interviews. Well, as I'm getting ready to walk up, they stop me. I'm like one of 8. And they said, I said, what are they doing? Security guy says, these guys all went to the Wharton School of Business. To which I said, what is that? And because I really genuinely didn't know. And I tend to, if I don't know something, go, I don't know, And he goes, that's a really good school. He kind of looked at me like, Trump went there. I'm like, dude, you don't know either. You work security here. Like, what do you know? You're an idiot. You just heard it earlier. Yeah. Like, don't roll your eyes at me, bro. I'm gonna punch you in the mouth. But I didn't. Right? So they start walking by me. So I said, they probably think they're smarter than me. And he said, yes, I bet they do. And I said, okay, cool. I went to Eastern Connecticut State University. It's an enrollment admission place. Anybody could get in. I went there to play baseball, and that was it. And I remember for a split second that brain bully, right, was like, they are smarter than you. Now by the way, what you told me was great, because I tended to want to punch the bully in the face, which doesn't necessarily make it go away, because now I'm in this antagonistic relationship, right?
It means it has more power over you because it's getting you upset. I wish I'd read the
book a long time ago. I'd have been better off. And but I did beat all them, by the way, the 15. I ended up moving on, project manager. They all went to great school, cool. But it's funny because most of the people listen, what they say to me is, well, I don't have anybody in my family. Because that brain bully, then there's a lot of bullies in your life too. How do you handle not just the voice, but a lot of folks when they're trying to move up, what they'll hear is, and when I say move up, I move up financially. It doesn't make you any better human being. Whatever money you have, wherever you live. And I always said to people, I don't think I'm better than anybody, but I wanted more than the people around me. And I've had friends that, whatever, that bothered them. It never bothered me. I was never uncomfortable. I've been sober 22 years. I didn't not hang out in bars because I was better than people. I just knew that I couldn't hang out in there for a couple of years. Wasn't better than them. And then after a while, I'm like, why do I want to be there? Nothing really good happens at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 a.m. And I'm sober. Like, why do I want to be around that? And some drunk guy's going to start a fight and I'm sober. So he stands no chance. I can hit everything I want to hit. Like I don't want to get myself in trouble. How do you help people, empower them to tune those? What do they do with those for? Do they do the same thing, Lynn? Do they say, like, what do they do to deal with the myriad of people that are trying to keep them where they've always been?
Well, first, the piece is comparison. We're comparing ourselves to other people, and that will set us up for failure 100% of the time as well, because you are your unique self, and it's the only thing in life in which you'll have zero competition. Only thing. The only thing in your whole life, because there's nobody else like you. And that's not Pollyanna, like, it's just fact and it's reality. So the brain bully, like you're pointing out, can also be right in front of your face. It's happened to me in the news business for years. I was told I was never going to make it. I was told that I slept my way into the positions, none of which ever happened. But of course, they're just going to tell me that because they're a brain bully and they need to justify why somebody else has been successful and they haven't. And I'll give you one other example. So my father's an immigrant, came here when he was 4 years old. His father was a carpenter. My grandmother was a seamstress. He got to senior year in high school and his brain bully, his guidance counselor, said, "You're not smart enough to go to college. Just become a carpenter like your father." So his brain bully was right in front of his face. He went to Pratt playing baseball because that's where he could get in on a scholarship. He went on to go to Cornell and MIT for a master's and doctorate and got another master's at Cornell, became a very successful executive and was assistant secretary of energy under the Obama administration. Wow. So when you choose to not listen to your brain bully, but have the confidence and contentment in knowing that it doesn't matter. You don't have to compare yourself to other people. You don't have to be smarter than anyone else. He wasn't smarter than anyone else. And that's why he got into this. He just didn't care. He didn't care what anyone else was doing. He didn't care if there were other people smarter than him. He knew his skill set and his limitations. So one of the reasons that I coach CEOs is because my father was offered the opportunity to become the CEO of the company, and he turned it down because why? He has a fear of public speaking, and he doesn't do it well, and it held him back. So he stayed in office of the chairman, and he was still really successful. But I want to be able to help CEOs overcome, and not just CEOs, anyone that's in a position of power, to overcome what's holding them back so that they can share that unique vision, message, solution, whatever it is that only you have.
So it's funny you say that because there are so many, and we have, we do events, like we're doing one coming up here in Miami. We'll have about 15,000 people there. And it's funny because some of the people that come in that are very successful businessmen and businesswomen, they're not connected to the crowd. I don't think they're bad. They're smart. I don't dispute their intellectual capacity, but it's like there's no connectivity. And I tell people all the time, when like even, it's funny because when I went to sell my last company, I didn't know what the word EBITDA was. Right. Mm-hmm. So I mean, like I'm smart, but I'm like, I didn't go along with it. Like my life, everybody's lives were on the line. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in this room with, and they told me where they went. They all went to really good schools and yep. Good for them. I'm not mad at them at all. I don't have any envy of what people have accomplished. I'm very appreciative of what other people have accomplished. I'm a big fan of theirs. I pull for other people. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I'm kind of like, you show up and I'll beat you as long as like there's no skill set required. As long as if it's me outworking you, I'll beat you. And one of the people said, "What's your EBITDA?" It was my very first meeting I took with anybody. I was trying to bring on some capital and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the company. And I said, "Why don't you tell me what it is, and then I'll answer you." So he's like, earning before income tax, depreciation, the whole deal, amortization. And I said, "In my business, I don't have any of the latter. Why didn't you just call it net income?" And the guy looked at the other, and he said, "That's actually a pretty good point." I said, "Well, y'all wouldn't sound as smart. Like you can't pay for that at Cornell or Dartmouth unless you get taught EBITDA. At Eastern Connecticut State University, we say, what's your net? Since there's no depreciation or amortization in your business." And we just laughed. But after the meeting, he had said to me, "I really appreciate you saying that because most people they're like, you're very genuine." I said, "I know, and I'm very intentional about it too. Like I'm overly genuine because I'm trying to connect with y'all, understand I'm not dumb. I get it all figured out. But at the end of the day," and I said, "By the way, I'm not doing this." I said, "People actually fall for this." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're going to give me X amount of dollars. I got to pay you all of it back. And then you own a percentage of the company." I didn't go to like Cornell, but the people that went to Ivy League school say yes to that. And he just kind of laughed, and we remained friends. Like, I did not do a deal with them. But, I think for a lot of the folks, Lynn, they see people and they think like when you're on TV, there's no way they think that you'd be nervous, right? Because you know everything, right? I mean, just let's be honest. And I guess for me, some of the people, and I've watched, Steven referred you over, I was like looking at some of the stuff, and even that, like talking through it, not at the camera. I'm like, I learned that. That's cool because I didn't know that. But everybody has their own set of insecurities because we're human beings. What advice would you give? Because we have a lot of people that reach out and say, I left my job at the state after 14 years, and I didn't leave it because I was trying to get rich. I actually I left there and started looking. I was always working part-time, but what happened was my boss got changed. Like, I had one guy for a long time, and they brought this other person. The person had no idea what they were doing. Actually, I want to change my brain bully to Paul. That was my English teacher my freshman year in high school. And he said, you're never, ever, I wrote a poem about, and it had Rolex in it. He goes, that'll be the closest you'll ever get to a Rolex because you're nothing but poor. Like, you're just like white trash, like straight up. And I'm thinking, bro, I can beat the shit out of you. Like, why would you say that to me? Even at 14, I'm like, I can pummel you. But I didn't do that because I got to get in trouble. But Paul's the one. He's probably dead by now. But Paul, I own a bunch of Rolexes in case you're alive. But at the end of the day, what we were looking at was, when you look at a lot of the people, like, I left there because my boss wouldn't let me make good decisions for children anymore. And what she would do is she would make decisions based on regulations that were outdated. And I actually removed a kid from his parents who didn't need to be removed. And some really bad things happened to him in the shelter foster care system. And I was like, this could have been avoided. Like, he did not need to be moved. Like, and that was it. It wasn't money. It was like, I'm out because this sucks. And I've lived this thing, Lynn, where I don't want to listen to you if you've not been there. Like, since you've gone through it, and again, you've been honest about it and you persevered. What would be your advice? Because a lot of people, they're really in a place where, like, hey, I can't make it. Like, I'm trying really hard and I can't make it. You saw your dad, your grandpa, the things they've done. What would your advice be to that person? Not just the confidence is great, but any other business advice, where it's like, okay, because what I always tell them is, you can't quit your job tomorrow, which means you have to work more. Like, when your grandfather was doing what he was doing, he was working a lot. I mean, he was going to school here, he's doing this, he's putting himself through school. What is your advice to people about how hard it's actually going to be? Because I tell people it's going to be harder when you take on your new, whatever it is, entrepreneurial. Like, if you're trying to get a TV, you might have a job somewhere else and you're trying to crack into that industry, right? Like, when you decided to do what you were doing, how hard, like, what was your first job? I mean, you didn't just walk out of college and get on TV.
No. First, before I get into that, I want to talk about the relatability piece that you were talking about. To have true connection, which connection leads to success. Like, I only want to do business with people I can connect to. In order to have that connection, you have to have relatability. To have relatability, you have to be able to say out loud some of those things, like what you said about EBITDA. And the only reason I know about EBITDA is because I consulted for a publicly traded company and I had to Google EBITDA. And then the only reason, so this is a great one that I'm going to say out loud. When I first became an entrepreneur and I was going to these entrepreneur meetings and stuff like that, everyone kept talking about scaling. I'm a news anchor. I read Glass. I don't know what scaling means. What does it mean to scale? So I'm Googling and I'm like, it's to grow something. Okay, how do I grow this, right? But everyone wants to sound so smart. So I just wanted to make that point of, when you admit and say, all right, why don't you tell me what EBITDA is? And then I'll tell you what it is. Because you did that, I think that's such a key indicator of your success, because you haven't been trying to pretend like you're some Wharton Business School graduate and keeping up with all these people. That's why you've been so successful. The authenticity will make you more successful than your resume. 100%. The second part, as far as the differentiator, so one of the exercises that I also have people do, and you'll see in the confidence quotient, is I have them identify 3 things that they do that 90% of everybody else doesn't do, right? That's your 10% edge. And then what's the one thing that you have done, you are doing, or you will do that nobody else has done? And that's your uniqueifier. And think about weaving that into your business, because that's your differentiator, right? Why are people going to do business with you rather than the 50 other people that provide the exact same service that you do? It's going to be because of your uniqueifier and your 10% edge. So identify what those are, along with your perceived weaknesses and fears that you can say out loud so that they have less power over you and they stop holding you back. So when I was at Miami University, I had a guest speaker. His name's Rick Ludwin, and he was the head of late night at NBC. And he's credited for bringing Seinfeld onto the network. Nobody wanted to pick it up. And he's like, I'll pull it from my late night budget. He was Jay Leno's guy. So he's the reason Seinfeld became what it was. He's a graduate of Miami. He came to the school, and I didn't know the guy from anything, but knew his background, and it was my dream to work at NBC. So I brought my resume, and I had been interning at different places since I was a freshman. So I go to him. I had radio experience as an intern and magazine. And I went up to him and I was like, I know you don't know who I am, but this is my resume and it's my dream to work at NBC. And he just passed it on to the person at the page program over at NBC. And that person happened to be like, well, that's ballsy. So then that person happened to give me an interview. And then once I got in front of her, I showed my differentiator and my uniqueifier so that they could see the value in bringing me on. So I got the NBC page program. And I actually started September 10th, 2001. So after September 11th, everything was shut down. They put us on the assistant desks of a lot of the executives. And, you know, we were basically secretaries. And I was a secretary for 4 years. But I, you know, and this goes to sort of a lot of the debate right now about the hustle culture and how, you know, quiet quitting and people not going above and beyond. And I'll stand behind my philosophy on that, which is I would not be sitting here doing what I'm doing today had I not been the first one to show up, last one to leave, doing things that weren't asked of me, and impressing the right people. Like just being there in certain situations, being in front of people and showing them the deliverable, they're going to take a chance on you before anyone else. And so my secretary career was, you know, growing and growing and growing until I got to the office of the president. And then it got to a point of, do I want to become an executive assistant for the rest of my life? Or do I want to take a chance and do exactly what you're talking about right now? It's having the confidence to say, yes, I could stay really comfortable, make a decent amount of money, and always have this protection. Or I could go and take this skill set that I want to hone and go out there and give it a shot and know that if I don't do well at it, that's okay. I'll just keep going, right? So I had many doors opened that I could walk through, and it was up to me to actually execute on the other end of that door, no matter how many doors are open for you. So the number one is finding mentors in your companies that see their potential and then leaning on them and telling them what you want. You have to tell people what it is that you want to be able to get it. Then when I was in the news business for 15 years and I saw the shift in journalism, I felt more of a problem than a solution. And I wanted to reverse engineer the skills that I acquired over those 15 years and then help people that have a powerful story and share that on these platforms in the media so that we start talking about solutions and stop screaming at each other, and we're getting nowhere. And when I made that decision, of course, I didn't just one day turn on the lights and have a website and all of that. I spent a good amount of time while I still was in my job planning that, just planning it, building, what does this look like? And then when I launched it, created different buckets of my business for different streams of revenue to see what bucket is profitable, which maybe isn't so profitable, and maybe all three can be profitable, and then it's even better. And so that would be my advice, is leaning on people. Think about that business before you actually turn the lights on, and then create various buckets of the business so that you can have different streams of revenue.
Well, first of all, that was amazing and it was really insightful. And I think I want to address something, because I think a lot of people, you said getting there early, staying late. You know, it's funny. There's like broke speech, broke talk. Broke speech is he's an ass kisser. And it's like, you know, successful people don't say that. See, that's where you get caught in your mind. Like whether you're trying to do it athletically, academically, you're trying to ingratiate yourself to mentors. I always said, like, mentors are important. I found my mentors by doing more than everybody else did. And I also didn't care what anybody thought. Now, my way wasn't right. Your way's better. But I'd be like, if they're like, hey, you're doing this, I'd be like, one more time you say that. One more time. Because I have a very old Neanderthal way of hierarchy. Kind of like, you say that to me and you're a guy, then why don't you say it to me outside?
You and my husband would get along so well. And also tear everyone apart. He's the exact same way. He's like, say it to my face, say it outside, let's take care of this.
And that was my unique. If I was like, I'm okay to get punched in the face. Like, I'm going to get where I want to get to without a fear of that consequence. I'm working hard to take care of my family and do things for me. I don't have time to apologize. So always people are like, man, I want to tell you, I don't mean to kiss your ass, but I always stop and I go, so dude, I don't worry about what you say about me. I'm not here. But think about what you just said. If I was ever going to mentor you, think of how immature and embarrassing what you just said was. You literally prefaced it saying something nice about anything, and I don't care about it. That doesn't feed me. What fuels me is not you telling me that I'm doing really good. Hey, bro, I am doing good. Mm-hmm. I suck at a lot. I'm good at this. Mm-hmm. Whether you tell me I am or I'm not worried about it, but you need to stop talking that way. Because if you go find somebody who really wants to mentor you, the minute you say that, they're going to be like, that's immature. It's a low self-image identifier. That's your uniqueifier. Mm-hmm. It's low intellectual capacity. Think better of yourself, because the wealthy people, like if I was sitting with your husband and I'd have no problem complimenting him. And I wouldn't say, hey man, I'm not kissing. What would that bother me for? Mm-hmm. And that's when you decide to change I always say, redefine the nature of your association, right? Like I'm a big Doc Holliday fan. And whether he said it in real life or not, in Tombstone, they said that. He says they come in, doctors like, hey, you can't keep doing all this stuff. You got, they call him a lunger in there. You got tuberculosis. And he's like to his girl, we have to redefine the nature of our association, which she basically is like, that's not going to happen. We're going to keep doing this stuff. And he's like, my God, you're going to be the death of me. He ended up being the death of him. Like, he died pretty early. He never stopped. He never redefined the nature of association. He wanted to get out of all that. Like, can't drink and smoke all day long. And I got to slow down if I'm going to live. And then it was like, no, I'm just going to go ahead and stay there. You're going to die a slow death if you keep saying things like that. Now, people around you would have said, oh yeah, because that's where that whole, look what she did. She did this to get to the top. No, you did things other people weren't willing to do. And you didn't apologize for it. So those of you that are out that are trying to find mentor, and I love that you said mentor, because I tell people all the time, find somebody. Now I'll tell you why I won't mentor you if you do that. Most people they're going to be nicer and they're going to keep moving. You won't even know why they won't mentor you. Mm-hmm. It's because you have that broke speak, that smell on you is that smoke a battle, either because you're working hard or this idea of, and it breaks my heart when people say that. I don't mean to kiss your ass, but you're really good. Dude, I know I'm good at this. I suck at a lot. I don't need you to tell me I'm good at it. So it's just doing those things other people won't do, and most people won't do them now. I had a guy on the other day and he said, I love this, when you're too big to do the small things, eventually you'll be too small to do the big things. That's right. Like, so I like that. And I'm not above doing anything like at the company. That doesn't matter to me. And I'm not going to apologize for anybody. I always show up early and leave late. I do it still. I'm not going to apologize to anybody. My kids, it's funny because my kids always be like, Dad, we're an hour and a half early. I'll be like, if there was traffic, we would have been right on time. What do you want to do? I'm like, sit in the parking lot. Whether it's my son's baseball, my daughter's dance, my son's football, basketball, but whatever, my daughter, her pageant. But I was never late. Never. People are like, sorry, there was traffic. No, you're a poor place. Don't do that. That's weird. Yeah, but there was, dude, I don't care. That's weird. It's on you. So as you see people and they're trying to find a mentor, Lynn, and we'll kind of wrap up with this.
Yeah.
What is, if they're out there, they're because right now we're trying to build a self-image. We're trying to get people to understand that the people that are doing what they say they want to do are not necessarily, as you said, smarter than they just put their mind to it. They have those uniqueifiers and they do all that, which is amazing. But as they're trying to connect with a mentor, how did you connect? Like, what are the things you did to get that man or woman to go, you know what? I'm going to give her some time. What are some things that you can give? What advice you give the listener about how to find that mentor and connect with that mentor?
One, it's deliverables. And this is where I now am looking for people to mentor. When they come on and they impress with deliverables immediately out of the gate, outcome thinking, when they are coming into it and they're delivering on everything, I think to myself, I need this person in my ethos. I have to have this person, and I want to grow them so that they can continue to not only help me, but help business in general. And inevitably they'll grow. And the second piece is that relatability, is somebody who is willing to be vulnerable and admit what they don't know and look to you for that guidance. That's the whole point of a mentor. And it's not just to have the relationship and to have doors open. It's really leaning, I was just at this keynote and talking to the CEO, and I said to him out loud, I said, I'm a new entrepreneur and I'm going to ask a lot of questions because I want to pick the brain of somebody who's been at IBM. And I just asked the questions, that curiosity, and being that vulnerable and saying, I know what I don't know. And I want you to help me to understand what it is that I need to know. And when you do those two things, you'll see it naturally happens. It's human nature. We want to connect to somebody else, and then we want to help somebody else. We can't even control that emotion. We're made that way, which is what's so great about it. We just have to lean into it and let it happen.
So I think it's what you got to understand, guys. There are people that want to hear Lynn saying, I'm looking for people to mentor. I think a lot of people that are having success feel the same way. I want to make more of a difference. Like I've done these things for myself. I've thrived. I've learned a lot. I want to share that knowledge and be clear. The minority of people, because the majority of people are too full of themselves. They can't ask questions. Be a good question asker too. Like, hey, I'm wondering how you got there. Not the, well, what was the biggest, like think your questions through with vulnerability and transparency. And questions aren't your life story. Bill, I got a question for you. Mind? Is it who, what, when, where? Because if it ain't something else, bro, I don't need your life story now. I don't need a whole episode of Crazy 101. We all went through stuff. Like, do you have a question for me? And I think that it's so simple to separate yourself with your deliverable, because you can just decide, hey, here's how I'm going to do this. I want this. But if you aren't finding a mentor, it's not because they're not out there. It's because they've decided they don't want to mentor you. You're not looking in the right places. You're not having the right discussions. You're not asking the right questions. And I'm telling you, Lynn, I actually, and I've not said this before, I'm excited to finish Confidence Quotient. I really am. This has been really, really full of information. I like that. Like, Shawn, I want people to grab something that's articulable and say, okay, if I can do these things, I can change. And it's really been an honor to have you on. I mean, you've done so many things, and tell your husband if like a big fight breaks out, I'll give him a call.
No problem. Like, he'll be there with bells on.
Sounds like he'd be a lot of fun to have on my side. So
totally. And Shawn, after you finish, let's hop on a call. I want to talk more with you.
100%. Thank you so much, guys. Hey, guys, it's important on Punch Me in the Face that we understand that that's my like, if you can go out there and just keep getting up, keep getting, the good news is they're figurative punch in the face, right? Like at the end of the day, it's getting you to understand that if you can control your emotions through this and realize you want something different. And Lynn's a phenomenal example. She's had an insane amount of success. There's a lot of people out there that have achieved and are looking back to put their hand out and say, let me pay it forward. I want to help some people. You need to find people like this and figure out what your identifier is, your unique-ifier, all that stuff. It's unbelievable. It's all in the Confidence Quotient. And there's a link below if you want to get, you guys should get a copy, get a bunch of copies. Lynn, thank you. It was a pleasure having you on.
Shawn. Thanks for having me.
Guys.